Hi, everybody. It's Suzy Welch. This is the Becoming You podcast. I am a professor of management practice at NYU Stern School of Business in glorious New York City. Come and visit us sometime. And this podcast is about, it's about becoming you. And it's about the way you do end up becoming you, which is a lifelong journey. So, you're going to have to be listening to this podcast for the whole rest of your life. Look, in this podcast, we're doing something new and very, very exciting, which is I'm having on as a guest one of my students, Michael Lopez, who actually went through the Becoming You process. Say hi, Michael.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, there he is.
So glad to be here.
So exciting. All right. And along with talking to Michael about what it was like to go through the Becoming You process, we're going to take some questions from the audience, people who have written into me. We're going to do that. And we'll finish up with rapid fire questions when my team tries to stump me and see if there's something that I can't answer. And you know what? Occasionally they do stump me, but I do my level best to come up with answers to their unbelievably obscure, left field, wackadoodle questions. Like, if I could remove one emotion from the world, which one would I remove? Which was jealousy, by the way. All right, but I don't want to waste another minute here. I want to talk to Michael. All right, so listen, before my class Becoming You starts, I stalk my students on LinkedIn, and we actually make index cards for each student, because Becoming You as a process, which is actually Becoming You, just to refresh everyone's memory, Becoming You is a process by which we try to answer the question, what should I do with my life, right? Yeah. It's a process by which we try to figure out who we are, standing still, right? Which was a great line that came from Sophia Borzilleri. Sophia, say hello. Oh, there she is, one of my team members. Who we are while we're standing still, so we can figure out which direction to start running in when we do run again, or to change directions if we are already running. And so I stalk my students like you, and I make up a little card on them, and I saw that you'd been in the hospitality industry. You're not the typical MBA profile. All right, so why don't you start off by kind of telling us two things. What you did before, three things. What you did before your MBA, why you went to go get your MBA, okay? And why you took Becoming You.
Yeah, so before the program, it was 8 years of this really amazing career in restaurants it started, I was doing all these odd jobs, like internship here, internship there, and then somehow found myself working as a host at a front door. It was part-time, it evolved, and then look, 8 years later, I was a sommelier.
Yeah.
I had a wine program at my fingertips. There was a moment that, in 2020, the restaurant industry was decimated. I was laid off along with thousands. And having always wanted to get my MBA, I knew in undergrad when I was finishing up, and I was like, I'm going to go into the restaurant industry. I'm going to grow. I'm going to build this career. I'm going to manage. And then eventually I'm going to go back to school. And then the pandemic hits, and I'm like, I'm going to do this now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was something, that just felt really exciting about, being in an industry that had these, unprecedented challenges.
You loved being in the restaurant business, though, didn't you?
Oh, very much, very much. It felt very natural. I remember, the first restaurant I worked at, just being, it was almost uncanny how easy it was to connect with people.
You loved people.
In that space.
Right.
I loved people. I loved being there, whether it was as, an employee and really a liaison for
right.
the chef and the whole staff there.
It's so natural to you. Like, I would love you to be at the door of a restaurant I was entering. I'd be like, I'm home. It would feel so great. All right, so you decided to go to business school, and the pandemic kind of was the moment of reckoning for everybody. And so you were going along in business school. What were you thinking while you were in business school about what you were going to do next?
It was, I came into it while still working in a restaurant, and the progression was pretty crazy. During the program, I was working, promoted, lost that job, got another one, was no longer working at that one. It was it was a very momentous 3 years in addition.
I'm sorry, I must interrupt you because Pierre would like to sit in your lap. Okay, I think he's gotten over it. All right, I'm sorry, Michael.
It's so funny
Dreadful.
Because I have a cat too, and so my morning alarm is just getting licked in all the animal love. So I'm in my element.
This is a crazy animal house right now. All right, so you were going along. It was crazy times, and what did you think you were going to do? Like, did you get bit by this is where I'm going with it, my friends. Did you get bit by the consulting and banking bug?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially in the last year when I really opened myself up to thinking about what else could I do. Because business school, I think, for the 3 years I was in it, I had always been prior to then with restaurant people, bartenders, sommeliers, servers, people who were just very homogenous.
Right.
Is really where I was. And then now I'm all of a sudden I'm around people who are in finance and marketing and consulting and tech, getting a little bit of all of those roles. The consulting bug.
But also, look, this is what happens. For those people who have not been to business school recently, 80% of business school students, not just at NYU, okay, but at almost every business school, go on a conveyor belt into banking and consulting. When I went to business school, I didn't even know what banking and consulting were. Okay, I had been a reporter. I had no idea what they did. Did you know what bankers and consultants did?
I didn't know what a hedge fund was until maybe last year, or at least what hedging, entailed. And then, I mean, someone puts it together, and that's the beautiful thing at NYU. We had great professors who I think almost all of them. I mean, like, especially corporate friend, like that was a class. It was like, oh my God, it's going to be so dry. And I actually learned so much, even if I was able to say, I don't want to go into finance. I don't know if I want to go into this big consulting that everyone is doing. I definitely considered it, and I was bitten by everyone's bitten by those money. Bugs.
I mean, first, it's two things. It's the expedience. They're there saying, "Come work for us." It's like they're the sirens calling you as you go down like the river Styx or whatever it is. Oh, and they're calling you, and when they're calling you, they're shaking big bags of money at you, right? And it's you'd have to be very stoic to not just glance in that direction and say, what's so bad about it after all? I mean, maybe it's okay. And so I'm always really psyched about the students who end up in my class, because they're the ones, because Becoming You is an elective, and they end up there and at least they've thought to themselves, question mark over my head, is that all there is? Or look, I get a lot of students who come into Becoming You, as you know, who already have offers in hand and have said yes to banking and consulting, and they still want to know who they are. So wait, let me just ask this last question. Why'd you take Becoming You?
First and foremost, friends. Friends were like, we have got to take this class.
There's a crazy professor.
There's this professor, and you've just got to get on her class. I mean, it was like there's this mythical sort. It's like Scott Galloway's another person. Everyone's like, oh, you've got to take his class.
All right. So there's a little bit about the crazy professor, and then what else?
But beyond that, I think that when I thought about where I was at the end of the program, I think with so many more questions.
Yeah.
So many more. I was like, I have less of an idea as to where I'm going than when I started. And the redirection has been great.
This is the problem today, in that, like, the more you learn, the more questions you have. And it's like not a narrowing thing. It's like, wait. And it's like I say this in class, and I'll say it again to you, is that it's like the cowbell syndrome. You can want to be a country veterinarian giving vaccines to cows, and you can want to ring the bell on the NASDAQ when your company goes public. And you want both of those things at once, because the more you learn, the more you think, gosh, both those paths seem really cool to me. And it's crazy. You can just be lost.
And I thought the importance of, I went into the class knowing and having learned in the final weeks of the program, the final year, going to a recruitment conference where it's all about embracing who you are, while at the same time trying to figure out, your job and what you want to do.
Right.
After the authenticity component was so important and so impactful back in October, that there was, once I knew what the class was, there was no way I couldn't. I think you might remember, but I sent an email to academic advising.
Oh, that's right. You didn't get in on the lottery. Yeah, that's right. You didn't get into on the lottery, but you advocated. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Had to pull that card.
All right. I'm so glad you got in, because you were an incredible addition to the class, and I love my students so much, and you were a wonderful member of the class. All right. In Becoming You, listeners, and we go through a process where we excavate values. We identify your aptitudes, your unique aptitudes, because you spend your whole life with people telling you what you're good at. It's very important to learn what you're actually good at. And the same thing is true with values. Like we talked about in class, there's these 4 horsemen of values destruction, and they go for you. They get in the way of you living by your values, like events and expedience and economic security. And then we look at areas of interest. Now with you, your area of interest was pretty clear. To me, just having done this many, many times, I knew that you're a person who needed to be in a field that had some kind of hospitality to it, whether it would be restaurants or hotels. It didn't really seem to matter. Just looking at you from the outside, you had a natural love and an affinity for the hospitality industry. And so for when we got to that third sphere, when we're talking about all the different mega trends that are coming in AI and quantum mechanics and all these other things, you weren't a student for whom this was like the screaming out, but you did do hard work around values and aptitude. So let's talk about that process, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So reflect on the values discovery process for us.
First of all, probably the deepest. I think that what we uncovered in values excavation was it was the part where I was holding a mirror to my face and I was like, who is this person? It's you. And yet, like, I was seeing myself in a brand new light for the first time. When we did the exercise where we had a number of index cards and we had to, oh my God, it was brutal.
I know that's brutal. That's friends, that's Value Solitaire, which is a game that I play with my students, which involves writing down, answering a bunch of prompts about what matters to you and people who matter to you. And then bit by bit, you start removing cards from the deck. I don't do this exercise. I don't do it in my book, and I don't do it on Instagram. I don't do it anywhere because and Michael, push back if you think I'm wrong. I feel like it needs to be facilitated because it's emotionally exhausting. It's emotionally daunting. People really lose it. People cry. It is hard. And so I actually keep that one very close. And it was invented by Alexis Kinney, who was a PhD student when she created it at James Madison University. I found it reading the clinical psychology literature. I've adapted it and I work with her, but all props to her. She's a genius. She uses it in her private practice now. And she uses it in clinical settings where people are overcoming addiction largely, but in other settings. She has asked me, do you think we should put this out into the world? And tell me if I'm wrong, it needs to be facilitated, don't you think?
I think that the pressure of it, that it is, I think, kind of done almost blind, makes it so that you feel, we only have a few minutes to decide what's really important.
That's right.
And making those decisions under pressure, I think that you then really clearly see, well, what is it that's really important to me?
It's a forcing exercise. Yeah, that's right. Because you know what? If we don't have a forcing exercise, we can go around saying everything's a little bit important to us or everything's a lot of bit important to us. And at a certain moment, we have to make the trade-offs. And that's what that exercise forces you to do. And there's actually people who have asked me many times to make a digital version of Becoming You. And I resist it because a lot of this stuff is so difficult that to do it alone in a room doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm actually by the way, friends, I'm having a little 3-day version of Becoming You coming up in New York for non-NYU students by popular demand. And I will play that. Play that game. Game. We will do that exercise. What did you discover in doing that exercise? What did you find out about yourself that you did not know? How old are you, by the way?
I am 29.
Okay, so
that last year before 30, I get to start saying that soon.
Get over it, okay? Get over it. Where's my little tiny violin?
I'm kind of excited.
Okay,
what did I learn in that one? And I think all the exercises that followed. I think uncovering your values is one thing. I think the harder part is realizing where values I had were at odds with one another.
So like give us an example.
So I think being very altruistically motivated and valuing helping other people.
Yep.
And then also being and not valuing my own economic motivations as much, and that being very low in extracting my values made me realize that I was putting others first, where I would have done so much better in life in many situations had I been a little bit more self-serving. And I was like, I don't know, and that goes to deeper questions and I think a deeper history of just coming. I think being born, raised Catholic, I was always taught to forgive and to give a lot more of myself to others. And it's hard for me to say out loud, I want to put myself first right now.
Yeah.
And that, I started to see how that had been affecting me in the workplace where there was a key moment in time where I could have been more economically motivated because I do value balance. I value working 4 days a week, not 5 in this industry. And I took a promotion that was also effectively, it was less money for the promotion with more benefits and whatever. And it didn't align with my values and I didn't know it at the time.
You got to know what your values are. I mean, it's like, okay, the thing about it is we kind of live by habit or we live by instinct or we live by like, okay, I also was born to a family where a Catholic grandmother was there and we used to say martyrs rule from the grave because the martyrdom was a great family trait. And you give and you give and you give and you wonder, why does this hurt so much? Well, because you got another value you're actually not living by.
Yeah.
And so you got to have a reckoning where you see where the trade-offs are. And then when somebody asks you to do something, you go through your mind, does this line up with my values? Instead of just having that gut habitual response to it. So where'd you come out with the values?
I've set a goal to say no more. I mean, thinking about just I think needing to be more self-serving in a productive way. Some of the values I think have helped me. In the interview process, thinking about also just like I think what I bring to an organization or a company, being very low in regulatory speaks to the fact that I just love being creative. And
Right.
although I respect rules and those who
Yes,
need
let's
to
talk.
be
Okay, let's
in
talk
the
about
box,
this.
yeah.
Let's talk about this. Okay, so you are actually segueing beautifully into aptitudes. In aptitudes, we find out a lot about our personalities. We do a lot of testing for this. I talk a lot about it in my book, which is coming in May, by the way. And you and I have one very, very shared trait. We both spiked on it, which is that we think of rules are for other people. And I mean, if
Absolutely.
I see a rule, I want to rewrite the rule. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, it's like if I hear how something is done, I say, "Is there another way to do it?" It's in me and it's in you, right? And this, in some ways, makes you incredibly valuable to organizations. But if you're in a bureaucracy, you are dead. Okay, bureaucracies don't like this. I had problems with Harvard a lot when I was working there because I was constantly coming up with new ways to do things that were not inside the rules. Okay, so when you found that about yourself, we found that out in one of the tests that we did. When you found it out, did you have this moment of like, oh my God, I am so seen?
It made me like think back to bosses who had let me live outside the box. And I was like, well, I'm really, really grateful for those environments where now I understand that I need an environment wherein I can say, okay, like if we are to get this done in any way, some rules are going to have to be broken. And this is just my, MO. And there were places I worked where there was a way that was, I mean,
Where it was respected and desired and appreciated,
yeah.
and it wasn't seen as a threat. Friends, listening. Okay, listen, this is why we do the work of becoming you. Because when we come to understand ourselves, then we have a language to say to a boss, let me tell you this thing about me. I'm all about the organization, but I'm all about creatively getting to the organization's goals. Is that good with you? Is that cool with you? That I'm not being naughty, I'm not being adversarial, I'm not being rogue, I am being creative. And this is my superpower. Does it belong at this organization or not? I mean, and it helps you when you're looking at organizations that you're going to join, like, yeah, I like that boss and I love their product, but man, I am going to be so at odds with the aptitudes that they want and the values that they have. Because there's blending between aptitudes and values. Because the thing is, when you're really like something, like you and I are both like this highly creative with the rules types, it ends up becoming a value because you're so good at it and you sort of like come to defend it. So
Yeah.
what else did you find out about yourself on the aptitudes front?
Found out, I mean, I think also there was another motivator, I think on that same test, the aesthetic motivator.
Yes.
Was off the charts.
Me
It was
too.
very, very high for me. And I think it comes from the art background.
Yes.
But also that motivator was tricky because it was about balance and harmony. And
Yes.
it was, it told me something that I kind of, I guess, knew innately, but I was like, oh, wow. I think it said that this kind of a person is easily swayed, or rather they can see multiple sides to the story, any story, and they want as much harmony and peace
Yes.
among all of the players, which, I think, to speak very lightly, it's geopolitically just a very hard time. And I find myself very much, again, trying to establish harmony. And find common ground
Yes.
for, all people and,
Right.
and everyone in any situation. And that applies to me in so many different rooms.
And look, it's so important. Like, so this value, I happen to call it beholderism. It can be called aesthetic value. And this is about how you value harmony in your physical environment, in your emotional environment, and actually even like in your personal environment, like how you look. Okay, like I will not leave the house looking a certain. This is of high beholderism, and you can sort of take it as well. Isn't this very self-centered? But in fact, it's a real trait. It's a real value. Things have kind of got to look right and they got to feel right. I need my I need my feng shui, and so forth. And this is a real value. The trees in this case are as important as the forest, which is this kind of self-knowledge is critical in understanding what your career paths should look as. Let's talk about where this self-knowledge is leading you right now with your career path. Because when you did your area of transcendence analysis, what did you put at the center of that circle? And at the center of the circle is the overlap of your values, your aptitudes, and your areas of interest. When we created that together and you told the narrative, the 40-year narrative of your life, is just what we do in the last day of class, what was your story and where'd you land?
I landed at the center was I want to be the leader of an LGBTQ plus ERG at a company. Ideally, that would be in wine or spirits at, an LVMH or something of the sort, because that's, just this life I've envisioned. But I think you remember the tagline, but I could also do this at Consumer Health Group or another firm that is completely unrelated to what the past has brought, because I think you also remember from that exercise, my life was very episodic. I think each point in time was so disconnected from the other because there are so many different lives I thought I could live. But at the one, I think the area of transcendence was this place where I could be of service to my community members in the workplace in a way that just needs to be there no matter what I'm doing.
I think your defining value is non-sibby, which is helping others. And I think that this drives you. And I think that it's contained now by your understanding of your values around enough is a money and about achievement, which is, right, you have a high need for achievement. What was your Enneagram, by the way?
It was type 2, helper.
Helper
What all the way. And it was by a large margin. I think enthusiast came next, which on the Enneagram, I think
By the way, Enneagram is this tool that we use. It's $14 online. Go take it right now. It will teach you so much about yourself. I was a doubter on the Enneagram when I first started teaching it. I mean, the first year I taught it, I told my students, this counts 5%. That's boy, now I love it so much. I'm almost like a junkie about it.
I absolutely love it.
I'm like I've joined the Enneagram cult. And hey, if you're a person who's got 60 hours to kill, just take your Enneagram and then go to YouTube and type it in. There's a rabbit hole with no end. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in that rabbit hole. But so the helper. It goes to this value we spoke about non-sibby, about this. It's almost an compulsion to help others, okay?
Yeah.
It's in some people and it's not in others, okay? And then you marry that with the enthusiast, which is just sort of wanting to try new things, right?
Yeah, and that was second for me. And I don't know that I think some people in the class thought that you are one and only one type. And I was like, I'm a little bit of both of them. And
Generally, the real Enneagram diehards say you're one and stop and get over yourself, you're one. But I've definitely seen students present saying, I feel both of these. So I'm going to take the fifth on this one. Because the people who say you're one and only one are very smart.
Yeah, I think it's where they are in relation to one another. I think as with every exercise, it's not just about, the individual parameters or any motivator or aptitude you're being rated on, but kind of how, again, they come together in this mosaic. The Enneagram, I mean, the enthusiast, I see for myself as someone who loves learning and immersing myself in, a new topic. Like when there's something new, whether it's a new wine region as a sommelier or...
All right, give us a wine recommendation since we got you here.
It is summertime. I hate to say it, but Rosé.
I love Rosé.
All day.
I want to tell you something. Rosé haters, what's wrong with them? I mean, rosé gets all this hate. Last night, 2 days ago, I went out with my daughter. I had a glass of sparkling rosé. I was like, what is wrong with me? I should be drinking sparkling rosé like 3 times a day. Okay, then then there would be something wrong with me. But okay, so rosé, what else? Like what kind of rosé?
So I would say
get specific.
With rosé, you've got to be open-minded and you've got to drink something outside of Provence. Like leave the Whispering Angel at home. It's delicious. You can put ice cubes in it. I've done it as well. But why
is everybody in this room smiling so knowingly? For
a reason, it is absolutely delicious, and I think that rosé, sometimes it can be that, and it should be that, but there are other. I mean, you're Italian, and some of my favorite rosés are from Italy. There's one Cerasuolo. I'll leave that one for the group.
I want to just say that when did Becoming You become a wine podcast? I don't know, but I'm digging it. Okay, yeah.
Wine edition.
Okay.
It's this eastern Abruzzo is the region. It's this grape. Oh my God, I think it's a Montepulciano's the grape, and it pours so deep red that I could trick you into thinking it's a red, but it's a rosé.
I hope everybody's. We'll put this in the show notes.
It's like a fuchsia color, and it's so refreshing.
All right.
It's so fun. It's good with food. Like if you're at the Chop House or you're, on the Pet, it's just an interesting rosé, and it's a different one. I say just try them from places outside of France. France has great rosés, but you got to be. I mean, you've got to, as with this class, you've got to, open your mind to what could be.
But what could be? I love it. That's a great segue back because I was getting worried. Now let's say, let's get one last question with you because then I want you to stay and help me answer some of the questions from the audience. Of all the things you learned about yourself in the Becoming You process, what surprised you the most?
How important I think family is. Okay. Family came up quite a bit. And it was not just who family is, because I obviously have my, my mom, dad, my 7 younger brothers and sisters. I mean, a huge family, being the oldest. Right. But also what, I think chosen family is and how important people are. I mean, people, say all the time, but the best part of the MBA program, and I think the class, was the people who made it. And so I learned the most, and what surprised me, that always surprised me in business school, was how much I had in common with people who at the surface level on the resume looked so different.
Hey, So listen, what does he think about family? You remember from class, what I say is that everyone says family is a value. But what's really important for you and for everybody who's listening is that you have to have a reckoning with yourself about how much family really is important to you. And it's okay if it's not. I mean, look, I have no judgment, okay, unless you're hurting somebody. And, family, you can come from a very dysfunctional family background and say, I've said family is important, but I want to move away from that value because all it does is hurt me. Or you can be like you and say, look, you know what? I have realized, like, my family, I'm not going to ever put them second because this keeps coming up in all the exercises. So family is like every other value, including money, which is the most important thing is we get straight with ourselves about what its level, what its intensity is in our life. That's a whole part of the process. I'm so glad you're here. I could talk to you 24 hours a day. Write me all the time on my social media. Thank you for doing that if you're somebody who's done it. And I endeavor to answer their questions. We've got a few minutes left. Let's have one question from the audience and we'll see what Michael has to say about it as well. Go ahead.
This question is actually really relevant to the conversation right now. The question is, how can values and aptitudes be used to bring your best self to areas outside of work?
So my immediate reaction to this is they can't not do that because values and aptitudes are in you, okay? And you've got certain values and you've got certain aptitudes and you're going to bring them to everything. If you're a volunteer, you're going to bring them there. And the great thing about knowing your values and aptitudes, the greatest thing is the authenticity of them, right? Yeah. I mean, isn't that what you get from it? It's like, you said this great line, which is, this was a great self-portrait of you. And that once you have your self-portrait, you bring it everywhere. I mean, I'm on boards and sometimes I'm on corporate boards and I am trying to be a different version of Suzy because Suzy is not your typical corporate board member. And then I think they know who I am. They put me on this board for who I am. I mean, what do you think, Michael? Like, you bring your true self everywhere, right?
Absolutely. And there's this saying, I think, in many restaurants and managers have said before, you've got to check who you are at the door. And in many ways, I can't disagree with that more because you bring your values, your aptitudes to work. Right. I mean, boundaries are important. I think that knowing and having a greater understanding of what I value helps me determine, the time I'm spending at work. Yeah. And what can I, get from my job and what can't I? I'm not in a place where I can, create. When I work, I can't really create art. And so knowing that I have this creative output and I value aesthetics, I value really nice things, I have to, outside of work, apply myself creatively in different ways, whether that's painting at home or, finding other ways to
This is a great point.
Flex. Yeah.
This is a great point because if you are not able to bring your values and aptitudes to work, I'm sorry, that's too bad. But then make sure that they are fully flexing at home or someplace else. Although I would prefer all of you to have a life where your values and aptitudes are spread over every piece of your life. And sometimes that's a journey to get to. All right, thank you, whoever wrote that. Appreciate. By the way, I have one of my followers is a PhD student in England, I believe, and she does work on why and how we make decisions and how hard it is to change our minds. And I asked her to look at her research the other day, and I read it this morning because I wake up at 5 o'clock and nobody's around for me to talk to. So I read this research at 5 this morning. It's so good. I'm going to assign it in my managerial class. And this is the beauty of social media. If you ever get mad at it, I would never know about this research if I hadn't had. So this is a tangent of absolutely no origin, except for I just remembered it, and I am so grateful for people who write in like this person who wrote in this question. Okay, that was my point. Let's see if they can stump us, Michael. Let's have one or two questions where you try to stump me, and then we'll try to stump Michael. What do we got?
When you think of the one that got away, what do you think of?
When you think of the one that got away, what do you think of? Oh my God. I know. Think.
So
no,
much.
It's all right. We can think. All right. Do you have one?
I have maybe too many. I think.
I love it. Go ahead. Spill the tea.
I don't know. I think about, this is going to be crazy. I think about, there's two that come to mind. I think about one that happened in October. I went to Ramba and Procter & Gamble, I think, had invited me to go. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to work there. And I just had like that. I had that doubt and I didn't go to the interview. And I enjoyed other things about Ramba and other.
What is Ramba?
Foods. Ramba is Reaching Out MBA. So it's one of, I think, there are many conferences that happen for MBAs, for recruiting.
Okay.
very, I think, heavily for the full-timers. As a part-timer, you're sort of floating around. But a lot of companies, Deloitte, all the consulting firms, big ones, they all go.
So it's a
they have
big
booths.
recruiting
It's a big
thing.
recruiting
And you didn't go.
I did go.
But you didn't go get interviewed at P&G.
No, even though they said, we think that you should come to our booth and do that. And I was like, why didn't I do that?
Why didn't you do it?
I don't know why I didn't do it.
But you know what? I'm not sure P&G.
I think I would have
I think it's in Cincinnati. I'm not seeing it.
I don't know that I would have, been.
such a New Yorker.
I'm such a New Yorker. I don't know that I would have been happy working for any of those brands. I think now.
But they would have loved you and needed you. It might have been an interesting muscle for you to develop.
I wish I had done the interview. I wish I had taken that up, because what I learned from the class was that there isn't any opportunity I ever want to pass up as, not being a possibility. I think I learned to be very industry agnostic in, the current moment I'm at in my career, such knowing what I value. The other one that got away, and really this is the one that I is not saying no when I was offered the promotion. I was making good money. I was working a better, more flexible schedule. It was more aligned with where I was at the time. And the real one that, I think always gets away from me is the opportunity to say no, because I want to say yes.
That's such a good line.
I wanted to help
sometimes with a mistake is not saying no.
When your boss comes to you and says, like, we need you. Like, I'd put my notice in and they were like, oh, we don't want you to leave. Like, we'd like to promote you. I could have, very easily said, thank you so much for that consideration. This position doesn't line up with what I
But you hadn't
value.
taken Becoming You yet.
I hadn't taken Becoming You yet.
I know what got away from me. When I was at HBS, they recruited me to get my PhD, to stay 2 more years, finish up, and get my PhD. And I said no, because why? Money. I went to go get the money at Bain. I needed money, okay? We were desperate. And now here I am at 64 getting my PhD. Good freaking Lord. I mean, it is so much harder now. Why didn't I just stay and do it? And I remember the professor who was recruiting me just sitting on the stairs. We were sitting on the stairs at HBS and him shaking his head saying, you're going to be an academic someday, Suzy. Why don't you just do it now? They knew me better than I knew myself. Dumb. Okay, well, so that one got away, and that's a great question. And I think we're out of time, my friends. And please come back next week to Becoming You. I love that you're here, and we're very, very excited about all of you being here and our beautiful numbers of listeners. It's very exciting. And so stay with us. And thanks for joining us on Becoming You. Michael Lopez, I am so happy that you came when we asked. And thank you for being here and talking about Becoming You with us. And I'll see everybody next week. Suzy Welch. Bye-bye.
Such an honor.
Love you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay.